We've waited months to find out who are the Carolina Panthers under Dave Canales. We'll get some answers on Sunday when they head down to New Orleans, and we'll talk about it here on this NFL crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to another crossover Thursday edition. Locked On Panthers and Locked On Saints, getting you ready for the New Orleans Saints hosting the Carolina Panthers in the inaugural game of the 2024 season. Okay, not the inaugural game, but each of these teams' inaugural games. The NFL season is finally here, and here to break it all down is Julian Council of Locked On Panthers over at Julian Council on your favorite social media. Myself, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola. On today's crossover Thursday, we're going to dive into the things that need to go right for each team to get a win. We'll take a look at the biggest stories on each side of the ball for the New Orleans Saints, starting off with their new offense, and then we'll take a look at the biggest stories for each side. We're going to kick it off with the biggest story on each side of the football for the Carolina Panthers, starting off, of course, with the ever-important Bryce Young development. We appreciate you very much for being here and for being an everydayer and being making us your first listen here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's crossover Thursday brought to you by friends over at PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. So, Julian, we've waited long enough. These two teams met back in December. Most recently, they met earlier on in the season last year. They're opening up the season against one another. When the Carolina Panthers offense is on the field, what's the biggest story you're paying attention to?
The biggest story is the offensive explosion that's going to happen down in and down out. No. The biggest story is going to be Bryce Young and all the new pieces they put around him this offseason. Sure. We look at last year, the offensive line was a disaster. Why was it a disaster? Because week 18, the prior season against New Orleans, Austin Corbett tore his ACL. And he started off the season on PUP. Arguably, he was their best offensive lineman during that 2022 campaign when they turned things around after firing Matt Rule and were a run-the-ball kind of team. He got injured in that game. So did Brady Christensen. And that was the theme of the 2023 season for the offensive line, where they played 7 different left guards, 8 different right guards. I know Panther fans, you're tired of me saying it, but I'm going to keep saying it until we see this offensive line stay healthy. So now they brought in Robert Hunt at right guard. Austin Corbett's back at center. They brought in Damian Lewis at left guard. Christensen's now a backup. I feel like there's better depth. So seeing how that offensive line is able to mesh together, as they've yet to play a game together. They had the starters out there for the preseason game against Buffalo, but we did not see Corbett. He had a baby that day. So congratulations to him, his wife, and himself for their baby boy. And then Damian Lewis also had a personal matter. So we have not seen the Panthers' new offensive line together. So monitoring how they are able to play. Also on the outside, receiving core was the worst in the NFL. They've now brought in Deontay Johnson, and he's expected to be their X at number 1 read. So how does he perform in this game on Sunday? Like, that's what we're looking at. How has Bryce come along this offseason where he's been named captain? That happened on Wednesday. He's looked more positive. He's looked more excited, and they have actual pieces around him, I think, that will help him, I don't know, actually have a chance to have success this season.
Yeah. What a big, what a novel idea, right? Try to give your quarterback the pieces that he needs to be successful. I think that, like, looking at that Carolina Panthers offense, it's already starting to kind of like throw some wrinkles for the New Orleans Saints as well. When we spoke to Dennis Allen earlier this week, New Orleans Saints head coach, we asked him about, how do you prepare? Like, Dave Canales is a guy that you've seen before in Tampa, but like, how are you getting ready for what's with a different quarterback, a different scheme? Letting Robert Hunt go was, like, I think one of Miami's biggest mistakes. And then the Carolina Panthers get to be the big benefactor of it. How do you get ready for this offense? And so much of it is, well, we don't really know what it looks like yet. So it's going to be about who can adjust in terms of who wins this game. It's a really interesting little curveball that the New Orleans Saints now have to deal with.
When you switch over of surprise.
Yes. That's what it's all about, is the element of surprise, just like they drew it up. But it is, it's interesting. Like, this is why I love week 1, because there's no, we checked the tape and this, that, and the other, and this team is bad or this team is good. No one knows. That's why I love week 1, because it's the most honest, week of NFL football we're going to see. Everything after this becomes, all propaganda. When it comes to the defensive side of the Carolina Panthers, what are you looking for?
Yeah, defensively, I'm looking to see whether this team can get after the passer at all. Last year, even with Brian Burns, they were last in the NFL in sacks. And sacks is an extremely overrated stat. I understand if you're able to sack an opponent, get them behind the sticks, that is going to likely get them off the field faster and help you defensively. But really, what you should be focused on is pressure. And if you can get pressure on teams, you can sack them. You can also lead to turnovers. And coincidentally, the Panthers are also last in pressure rate last season, which means they're also last in turnovers in the NFL. So being able to get after the passer, get any sort of pressure, which can lead to turnovers, that's something I want to see. And I'm not encouraged by what I've seen them do this offseason. Now, it's not all on them. They signed DJ Wonnum. He had torn a quad at the end of his tenure in Minnesota after he had 8 sacks last season. Now, opposite of Danielle Hunter, that should be added in there, who is an outstanding player now in Houston, but he still was a solid player. That's 2 of the last 3 seasons. He's had 8 sacks in those seasons. So he has not played or practiced at all in the preseason, going all the way back to OTAs. He's currently on PUP, the physically unable to perform list. And there's really no timeline of when he's going to be available. When he was signed before the Panthers went out there and signed Clowney. And they also, Chase Young, that was a guy they brought in for a visit, who's, of course, down there in New Orleans. They settled on Clowney, who's from the area, growing up in Rock Hill, right across the border here from Charlotte in South Carolina, having played at University of South Carolina. We all know the background of Jadeveon Clowney at this point in time. He's now supposed to be the top edge rusher. We have not seen him really outside of the training camp, and I'm expecting that he'll be really good against the run for them. I don't have high hopes that he's going to have 9.5 sacks again this season. They certainly need him to, but it's the guys opposite of him. DJ Johnson, they drafted him last year out of Oregon. He was a tight end who turned into an edge rusher, 25-year-old rookie project, grand total of 0 sacks last season. Of course, I said sacks are overrated, but he didn't get any pressure either, which is a problem. Finally recorded a sack in the preseason finale at Buffalo, so that's nice to see as they head into the season. They cut Caleb on Chase on an LSU Tiger.
Yeah, I was a little surprised by that.
No one saw that coming. And Dave Canales, he was asked about that on Wednesday, and they said, we want to find somebody who's more dynamic. Don't know how they're going to find somebody who's more dynamic on September 5th, but possibly that can happen for this team. Eku Leota is another player. Jamie Sheriff, who they got off of waiver claims last week, led Seattle in sacks in the preseason for whatever that's worth. That's really what I'm looking at defensively. Like, fans are happy to get rid of Brian Burns because they didn't want to pay him $30 million a year, even though it's not their money and he's a player in his prime. But whatever. They have a player in Jadeveon Clowney who's going to be here for maybe a season, maybe 2. Yay, everyone be happy. You got rid of a good player to have a guy for maybe a year who's never been as good as Burns has been, if we're being honest. So I'm looking at the pass rush and whether this team can be able to get out the field on third downs and they can get any pressure and force any turnovers.
Yeah, super interesting there, because while Carolina's trying to figure out what they're getting in their pass rush, the New Orleans Saints trying to figure out what they have in their offensive line. So pretty good opportunity for both of these units from a prove it standpoint. Could also mean some false, results by the time that you get there, depending upon, hey, does the offensive line look good because the defensive line is struggling, or vice versa? We'll have to play that game at a later time. However.
You talked about all the lies coming into this week. I mean, teams gonna be lying to you after this week. I think you gotta wait until at least the end of September, get through 4 or 5 weeks before we really know the truth about certain teams. So there may be some lies told on Sunday, but if it's a W, I don't think you care.
Yeah. You'll take a W in that situation, no matter what. Coming up next, we're going to take a look at the New Orleans Saints side of things. Biggest story on the offensive side, of course, being the offense itself. What the heck does that mean? We'll define it here as we continue on with this crossover Thursday edition, Locked On Panthers and Locked On Saints, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Saints and Locked On Panthers is brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks, the easiest and most fun way to play daily fantasy sports without a doubt. It's awesome. It's simple. You pick 2 to 5 players, and then all you have to do is choose whether or not they're going to come in at more or less than their PrizePicks stat projection. So if PrizePicks has, let's say, quarterback Derek Carr at 300 passing yards, will they come in at more or less? If they have Bryce Young at 300 passing yards more or less. You get the idea. And actually right now, it's easy right now with PrizePicks because all you have to do to win up to 100 times your entry is get 4 correct picks, and they'll give you one of them basically for free. One Caleb Williams passing yard counts as one win on PrizePicks every week in September. Get 3 more right, and there you go. There's your opportunity to win up to 100 times your entry. So go and check them out today. Download the PrizePicks app and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL so you can get $50 instantly when you play $5. That is promo code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. And look, you don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, everybody, continuing on with this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Saints. We dove into the biggest story when the Carolina Panthers are on the field. Now let's take a look at the New Orleans Saints. We appreciate you very much for making us your first listen. For your second listen today, make sure you go and check out the new and improved Locked On NFL, a double daily dose of NFL content. Julian was over there hanging out in the barbershop with Tony Wiggins earlier this week. I'll be with the madman Tyler Rowland to preview everything tomorrow around the NFL. It's going to be a very, very fun time. So make sure you come and check us out over at Locked On NFL, wherever you get your podcast, and on YouTube, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So Julian, I know you're.
So Ross, do you not hang out in the barbershop? I mean,
I'm not in the barbershop. I wonder why. I wonder why. And maybe up here.
You don't get to take care of that beer just to go hang out.
Yeah, I'll get a little bit of that once the winter rolls around. But for right now, I'm a chill and bring this bald head over to Tyler's house for a little bit. Julian, I know you're dying to know what the biggest story is for the New Orleans Saints when the offense takes the field, right? Like, you can't wait.
Yeah, are they going to be serving beignets?
I wish that they would serve beignets in the press box. I would love that. Listen, the biggest story for the New Orleans Saints offense is the offense itself. What I mean by that is that, of course, the Saints brought in new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak to try to improve what this offensive system was last year, try to improve it to what it can be this year. So we're already seeing things even through the preseason. We've seen an increased rate of play action. We've seen an increased rate of motion, an increased rate of, Julian, you're not going to believe this, but attacking the middle of the field and throwing the ball 10 to 19 yards away from the line of scrimmage. It's been incredible. So, wow. So it's been really, really cool to see all of that in the preseason. How much of that, though, from their vanilla offense, their vanilla version of their offense in the preseason is going to effectively translate here to the regular season. And do the New Orleans Saints get this new offensive system under their belt? Julian, you and I were a part of the division preview for the NFC South, and that was one of the big things that I mentioned as my concern, along with the offensive line, is how quickly or not quickly the Saints actually get their offense under their feet in rhythm, and how quickly they can get comfortable with it. And so for me, this game against the Carolina Panthers at least gives them an opportunity to earn some momentum early in the year before they travel to take on the Dallas Cowboys, before they host the Philadelphia Eagles, before they eventually travel to take on the Kansas City Chiefs. Not a great lineup in the top 5 games for the New Orleans Saints, 2 division opponents plus those guys. This is a real kind of prove-it opportunity to see, can you get this offense rolling sooner rather than later?
The Kubiak hire is interesting. Like, he's been around the block a couple of times now. And of course, his dad, Gary Kubiak, who won the Super Bowl when he was Denver Broncos head coach against these Carolina Panthers back when they were happier times here in Charlotte. And he hasn't necessarily gone on to have the kind of play calling success Mike Shanahan's son, Kyle Shanahan, has had, and some of the other younger sons of some former great coaches in the NFL. So because he was okay in Minnesota. I think he spent a little bit of time back in Houston as well. So we'll see, because I'm curious to see how that looks. And I'm also curious, like Alvin Kamara, it feels like the last couple of years, he's had more off the field headlines than it seems like he's had on the field. So like, where are things at with him? And as far as how he's going to factor in his offense, as it feels like there's been some changing parts. Like, I love Chris Olave and what he's been able to do so far. Like, where's Kamara kind of fit into all this right now?
Yeah, I mean, he has to be a huge focal point for this New Orleans Saints offense, right? I mean, he has to be going into this. I mean, the idea here of what Clint Kubiak is bringing, which is different than what he did in Minnesota. And this is one of the things that he benefited from by going and teaming up with the son of Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan, last year over in San Francisco, is that now he brings that wide zone offense over to New Orleans, right? So the Saints really wanted to kind of get into that. They like the Kubiak offense, but they also really like the Kyle Shanahan offense, which Gary Kubiak, of course, historically had a huge hand in during his time working with Mike Shanahan over in Denver. And so I think that that's the thing that the Saints are hoping to capitalize on. So that puts a huge emphasis on Alvin Kamara, who at least up until the point where we recorded this has not gotten a contract extension yet, but that doesn't mean that he's not going to play in 2024. He's been very clear. He's playing whether he's got the contract extension or not. He just wants the contract extension. And so he feels that not playing won't help him get that contract extension, which is pretty sound logic, if you ask me. And so I
don't
think
tell Le'Veon Bell.
I know, right? It's such a different approach than what we're used to players taking. He's like, well, if I'm not on the field, I'm not getting paid. So what am I doing? So I think he has to be a big focal point in this offense because they want to establish everything through the run game. And I will say this too, they did a really good job, at least throughout training camp when we were out in California watching their training camp, utilizing him a little bit more in the passing game, which has also kind of gone by the wayside in the most recent season. So I think that's got to be the big thing for Alvin Kamara and his involvement. So I would expect a pretty big workload for him against Carolina.
You bring up the fact that they had training camp out in California. I mean, I know the Cowboys been doing it for a while, but Saints, I feel because they've gone to the Greenbrier up in West Virginia a couple of times, right?
Yeah, they're not doing that no more.
They went out to California. It seems kind of soft though, no? Like you
can't,
hey, you can't have like the Panthers.
It wasn't that. It wasn't that. They were renovating the facility, Julian.
Sure,
there was a real reason. They were renovating the whole thing. There's still a big hole in it. I saw it today.
Y'all can't just drive down to like Nacogdoches or Lake Charles, go hang out at McKee State or at somewhere else. Nichols.
You could have done it at Ullman. They practiced at Ullman.
Yeah,
they did it one day.
You can't go do that. Come on now. Like, I know you're playing a dome, but real men are made outside in the summer heat in the South. Come on now.
Hey, they take that heat on every year. They'll be right back in it next year. Don't worry. I'm curious to see how it impacts their conditioning though, because usually they're pretty good. Like fourth quarter, week 14, they're typically not tired because they've typically been practicing in 100% humidity and steaming hot weather and all this stuff. I'm curious, doing the California thing, did they soften up a little bit? I guess we'll find out.
Don't get tired in that human ass dome on Sunday.
On the defensive side, I think the biggest thing that I'm watching for New Orleans when it comes to the biggest story there is really just their ability to handle Bryce Young. Can they finish plays at the quarterback, which is something that they've struggled to do, and can they maintain a quarterback that can get loose, that can get mobile, that can move around and all these other things? They've struggled against that in the past. They're going to get a very early, quick, fast kind of test of that going into this year. So how much does Chase Young help you out there, if at all? How much have you grown there if you're Carl Granderson or some of the other younger edge rushers for the New Orleans Saints? I think that's the big thing and big story for me over on the defensive side.
Yeah, it feels like they're kind of like the offensive line. There's been a lot of changes, and looks like on that side of the ball too, as far as the edge rushers are. Like in this, I'm looking at the secondary because that's considered to be strength still, right, for New Orleans
big time.
Heading into this season. Yeah, because I look at what they're potentially going to do against Carolina, because I do still have questions out wide about guys like Adam Thielen entering to age 34 season. I know I've said it a lot to Panther fans, but it's football, man. Like it wears on you, and I don't expect him to have another 1,000-yard receiving season. I'm just kind of curious to see how he's able to get open this year, especially going up against that secondary early on, and then being able to put some pressure. You talk about trying to stop Bryce Young. How much pressure can they put on him as far as what will those windows look like? And they're always going to be smaller in the NFL, but going up against the Saints secondary, how small this window is going to be, and how much time will we have? Like Ike Ekwonu really struggled last season, I think, in large part because he had 7 different guys next to him at left guard.
Yeah, sure.
How is he able to bounce back in week 1? Like those are things I'm looking at. And so I think it's a good test for this team to get some answers, even if maybe there'll be some lies told on Sunday to get some answers against this New Orleans Saints defense.
Yeah, I think the Saints will be looking for some answers themselves as well. I think these two teams are going to be good tests for one another. Coming up next, we're going to dive into what each team needs to do in order to get a win. And for the Carolina Panthers, it comes down to the basics. We have that coming up for you next as we continue on with this crossover Thursday. Julian Council of Locked On Panthers, myself, Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Lots of job changes for both of these New Orleans Saints and Carolina Panthers team, and that's one of the reasons why we love our friends over at LinkedIn. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. Where you might be looking for a job change yourself, or you're looking to be able to provide somebody with an opportunity of a job change. Well, LinkedIn Jobs is a place to be, especially if you're a small business. Over 2.5 million small businesses are already using LinkedIn. Why? Because 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other job sites. So it's simple. If you're not looking at LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. 86% of small businesses end up getting qualified candidates to respond to their job postings within 24 hours. You can hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. They'll even help to make it easier for you too. Like they have this new tool that allows you that'll kind of write job descriptions for you and stuff like that. Just kind of makes the process a lot easier and a lot quicker. So if you're a small business, go and check them out. Join that $2.5 million number of locked on, or rather of LinkedIn users. Post your job for free today at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, y'all, wrapping up this crossover Thursday edition of Locked On Panthers and Locked On Saints, breaking down everything you need to know ahead of the Carolina Panthers at New Orleans Saints in that humid dome, as Julian mentioned. We're going to be diving in throughout all that. Make sure you come back on our Friday episodes as well, as we're take a deep dive, one more deep dive ahead of the game over on Locked On Panthers as well as Locked On Saints, so you can continue to keep up with everything going on with your teams before they kick off their 2024 season. I love the way that you said it the other day, Julian, on your show. You said when toe meets leather. I think I've said that probably 6 or 7 times after you said that. Probably one of my favorite football phrases I think that I've ever heard. So thank you for that. And I think you've got more really good football phrases for us when it comes to the things that need to happen for the Carolina Panthers to get a win, because it feels like it's kind of the fundamental stuff.
Yeah, and that's what Dave Canales has said from day one. Get the football right. Don't have 8 false starts in a game like they did last year at Seattle. Don't turn the football over. Be able to actually complete a forward pass. But first, what you got to do is you got to protect the quarterback. And then the receiver has to be able to get open. Then he's got to catch the ball. Then he's got to run.
So many good football phrases.
And be able to get yardage. Like, those are the simple, fundamental things. And I asked my listeners this on Twitter at Julian Council. There's your shameless plug. If you call it X, I guess you can follow me there too, but it's the same thing. Put in twitter.com, what pops up, Twitter. But I asked people, like, what are your realistic expectations for the Panthers this year? Most people were saying about like 6-7 wins. And then the common theme I heard was competence. Be competent. That's their expectation. So what I need to see from the Panthers for them to win on Sunday is be competent. What does that look like? Being able to stay on schedule on offense. I don't like the idea of this passing offense being in 3rd and long. I still need to see a lot out of Bryce Young, out of the offensive line's ability to protect, as again, we have not seen them together in this kind of setting yet. And I still got to see the receivers. I think Deontay Johnson can be good for them this season, but it's been a couple years. I think because of Kenny Pickett not being good, Mr. Trubisky not being good, Mason Rudolph being a little bit better last year, but still not being good. That's probably been a big reason why Deontay Johnson was upset in Pittsburgh and is now here in Carolina. And I think he's a better player when he's shown the last couple of years. So I still have a lot of questions about the pass game overall. So stay on schedule by being able to run the football, which is what Canales wants to do. He says they want to be stubborn about running the ball. That's what they have to do. And like defensively, they got to stop the run. Last year, first 6 games, gave up 130 yards plus each time. And Kamara's the kind of back who can burn them by in that run game. They were 31st against the run according to EPA last year, and that has to improve. I think with Clowney coming in, replacing Burns, who was low-key bad at setting the edge, that helps him. Having Shaq Thompson back, who broke his leg in this game on Monday night last year, that helps. Josie Jewell as well, who already understands the scheme from his one season spent with the Panthers coordinator Rogero Rivero out in Denver a couple of years ago. A'Shawn Robinson, better than Deshaun Williams. They should be able to, that's what they got to do, stop the run, and then find a way to get off the field, man, on 3rd down. I have concerns about the pass rush. I don't have concern about J.C. Horn when he plays. He's got to play. But there's still questions at the other corner spot. As Dane Jackson, there was going to be questions about him anyways, but he's on injury reserve for the first 4 weeks with a hamstring. So they traded for Mike Jackson from Seattle right before cut down day. He's been more of a rotational player. He's been better in that spot than as a starter. They brought in a bunch of dudes off the waiver wire who I have personally never heard of, who are maybe have to play on Sunday. So let's see what's opposite of JC and if they can get off the field, because that was a big problem they've had in years past with him not being healthy and just the overall talent level at that corner spot.
Yeah, that's big, especially with the matchup here. Let me ask one thing. You talked about like competence. You talked about the run game. in my opinion, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but in my opinion, one of the competent things that Carolina can do is turn their run game over to Chuba Hubbard. Is that the plan?
Yeah, the plan is to. This is what I always tell people when it comes to running backs: you pay them federal minimum wage, no overtime, no holiday pay, none of that. You use them, abuse them, then lose them. Chuba Hubbard's in his last year of his rookie deal. The plan is to run him into the ground. Miles Sanders, he has an out in his contract after this season. The plan is to run him into the ground. Like Jonathan Brooks, I don't know when we're going to see him. The rookie running back out of Texas, who's currently on the non-football injury list after tearing his ACL last November at UT. I don't know if we're going to see him. I don't even know if we need to see him because the Panthers have a capable back in Chuba Hubbard who had 900 rushing yards last year and took the number one job after Miles Sanders struggled to get out the gates, just like the entire team. But I think Chuba can be really good for them this year. So they're going to lean on that run game, want to run some play action, and really take some pressure off of Bryce. And Canales talked about all we need Bryce to do is play his 111. Now, you're going to need to do a little bit more than that to justify giving all that up, including DJ Moore last year.
Right.
But I understand what Dave is trying to say.
Yeah, makes sense. Good. I think that run game leaning a little bit more on Chuba Hubbard, I think is a smart idea. Certainly, it looked like that towards the end of the season last year. And the last time that these two teams met back in December, I think December 10th, Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders combined for 161 rushing yards. Now, that didn't lead to points on the board for Carolina, but it was huge in terms of keeping things going. And maybe that's the difference this year, because the Saints, I think it helps me transition a little bit to things I think need to go right. One of the big things that they got to get right is defending the run. Number 22 in the NFL last year. They did not take the steps forward that they wanted to last year. They have to be able to get back there and stop the run. That's got to be number one. The other thing for me is actually using Taysom Hill. I mean, the dude has been one of the best playmakers on the team and has barely seen the dang field for them. There were games, Julian, where he would have he would contribute 3 touchdowns and everything, 3 scores, and then the next 2 games see the field for single digits in each game. There's just no reason for that. And so I think that's a big one for me. The
best tweet I saw on Tuesday, or maybe it was Wednesday, was Catherine Terrell of ESPN.com, the Saints reporter, saying, "Breaking, Taysom Hill's back at tight end." This. Hey, they keep trying to make Taysom Hill happen. He's still in the league. He's gonna have 10 years. The guy's gonna get retirement from playing football. Good for him. But
I love it, so man. Funny. And I'm so glad that they changed his position designation for the fantasy aspect of it. But the fact of the matter is that he's still going to take snaps at quarterback. He's still going to take snaps at tight end. He's still going to be a returner. He's still going to cover on special teams. And now he's taking snaps out of the backfield, Julian, as a fullback and as a tailback. So just give him everything, but just keep him on the field. I mean, just give him the opportunity to go out there and make plays. I think that's one of the things that has stabbed them in the back over and over again, is that they haven't made that commitment to one of their best playmakers. And the final thing for me that goes kind of both ways is getting their passing game going. And as you alluded to, not allowing Carolina's passing game to manufacture in front of them. I mean, they have one of the deepest cornerback rooms in the NFL, one of the best secondaries in the NFL. Jordan Howden, the young second-year safety, is listed as the starter next to Tyrann Mathieu. I still have my suspicions that it will actually be veteran and former Detroit Lion Will Harris lining up there. We'll see if I'm right or wrong on that. But I think that secondary has a lot of talent, and that Carolina receiving room at the very least is trying to figure out what talent it has. So the Saints can't let them figure that out in this game. Let them figure that out week 2. Don't let them figure it out week 1. And then for the other side of it is taking advantage of what is a still kind of shaky secondary for Carolina, I imagine, with Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, getting Cedric Wilson involved, all that. And that's got to mean a good game from Derek Carr as well. So those are kind of the 3 big things for me: passing game and limiting, all that kind of stuff.
There is one more factor that we need to discuss. It's the factor of a revenge game. Lonnie Johnson Jr. is now a Carolina Panther, and
he is not happy with the New Orleans Saints.
He is not. When reports came out last week from NFL Network's Tom Pelissero that the Panthers were planning on signing Lonnie Johnson Jr. to the practice squad and then elevating him for week 1, he came out and said, "New Orleans, I love you. The front office, we got beef." So let's just see if Lonnie Johnson Jr. has the game of his life on Sunday, turns things around, and is able to help the Panthers win there in New Orleans. So I'm just going to throw that one out there. You heard it here first. If it happens, if it doesn't happen, I ain't saying
you never heard it. He
yeah.
never said anything at all.
Yeah. We're still trying to find the guy who said Lonnie Johnson Jr. was going to ball out. Would have been me.
Where'd he go? Where's that guy? Oh man, I love that. Yeah, I mean, look, he's a talented dude. I mean, there's no doubt about it. He's a talented dude. He actually looked good here in New Orleans. There was belief in terms of like what he could be here and everything, and then dealt with the injury and all that, and then whatever happened with those return negotiations, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens revenge game wise. Well, Julian, I'm so excited for this game. I'm so excited for your episode tomorrow as you take a closer look at this as well on your own. I'll do the same over at Locked On Saints, but really appreciate us being able to come together to break this down. Football is back, everybody. We did it. We made it, Julian. We're here. Football. We actually get to talk about actual football for a change.
No more hypotheticals.
No more hypotheticals.
We're probably still going to do them, though.
Absolutely. For Julian Council, at Julian Council on Twitter, host of Locked On Panthers. I am Ross Jackson, host of Locked On Saints. You can find me at Ross Jacksonola on your favorite social media. We appreciate you very much for being here, making us your first listen. For your second listen, go check out that new and improved Locked On NFL that both Julian and I are a part of. And of course, you can check out other big crossover matchups across the Locked On Podcast Network as well. We appreciate you very much for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, and for being here with us. We'll see you again here soon on Locked On Panthers and Locked On Saints. It's a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.